going to Harvard University, it won't guarantee you a good job, but it will certainly statistically give you an incredibly high chance of landing that if that's your goal. I find modeling does exactly the same way, even if it's not 100% all the time.
The Connect Coaching, Unplugged.
Welcome, guys. We are live and we wanted to jump on here and have what we have ordained Connect Coaching catch-ups with some of our great community, people that have inspiring stories that we feel like we want to share with everybody else that we're connected with, because the stories are fascinating. They show qualities that I think when we hear them as owner-operators of our coaching and training business, we can see parallels between their stories and ours. We can draw upon resources and strengths that they've shown along their journey. And we can really see that it's not just us out here on our own. We can see that there's amazing people just like you out there as well. And they are going through similar situations. They've got similar circumstances going on. And I want to share some of those stories with these catch-ups. We want to do a few of these catch-ups over the next couple of months so that we can just connect the community further. Our whole stick is Connect Coaching, and we want to do more things that we can stay connected by. So this is one of them. And today's guest, obviously everybody knows Connor Healy, friend and business partner of Connect Coaching, one of the co-founders. But some of you may be familiar with, some of you may not be familiar with Justin O'Hare, who over the last 5 or 6 years has taken the NLP industry in Western Australia to an entirely new height with his former business, Inspired Results. And he has been incredible at just really building out the coaching and training business over in Western Australia. He's done some pretty amazing things over there, which we'll get to in a moment. He's now the general manager at Ship Agency Services, and he's also the chairman of the Australian Association of NLP. Welcome, Justin. Great to have you here today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So, Justin, you and I have been connected for a very long time from your very first practitioner training in November 2017 in South Australia. And it was an interesting training and one I'll never forget, because there was a couple of times that I almost had to act as a security guard at the door at the back of the training room, because I think there was maybe 2 or 3 times that you were storming out the back and you were ready to leave.
Yeah, I guess I came into the course not thinking I had anything to work on. That was probably the surprising bit. And I think not really thinking I was going to learn tools and techniques of NLP and not knowing that I was in for a personal journey, and not knowing I was blindsided by a few of my own patterns that I maybe hadn't realized. And yeah, so I tried to leave a few times out of probably frustration, but I'm glad I stuck it out. It was life-changing for me for sure.
Yeah, it certainly was, because from that moment onwards, your life, having heard your story later on down the track, your life took a completely different trajectory. You were already working somewhat in the training and coaching space with learning and development trainings in business and corporate. But just to see the success that you had over that next 12-month period between when you did the practitioner training and when you did the master practitioner training, that success over that 12-month period actually became quite a famous story that I continue to tell in my trainings even today. One where you put the cart before the horse in many ways, where you weren't even a trainer yet. You weren't even a master coach at that point. And you decided to book your very first training in to train your own practitioners up, assuming that you were going to successfully pass your NLP trainers training and assuming that you were going to get enough people to put on a practitioner training. And tell us a little bit more about that, because I have my own version of it, but I'd love to hear it from the source, from the horse's mouth. Tell us a little bit more about what happened and what transpired over that 12-month period.
I think I left the training and I remember thinking, because I grew up, mum was schizophrenic as a kid. And I thought probably the most confronting part of it was, my own patterns coming to the surface. But it was almost this question of, are you telling me that there could have been more help out there for my mum? There could have been more help out there for my dad. Unfortunately, my dad had passed away by that stage. And I thought, surely it's not as easy as what had just happened in the training room. So I mismatched myself to a certain extent of wanting to go out and find people who would prove this didn't work. And part of that was a really interesting thing because perception's projection. And of course, I got the most obscure, unique clients with the most complex problems straight out of practitioner course because I was trying to find people who could show me this wouldn't work. And it kept working. So initially I had people coming in for all sorts of stuff, people who had suicidal ideations, which to me, I had no mental health coaching background and it was way out of my scope. But I was like, these people can't get help in our local area. There's a 6 to 12 month waiting list. If I don't see them, no one's going to see them. And at least if I sit down and have a chat, I can work out whether I think I'm going to be able to help. And I had people with all sorts of diagnosed issues, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, psychotic episodes, and people were just walking in with the most bizarre things. And so I think that I was trying to prove that it wouldn't work. I attracted all the clients that would potentially prove that it wouldn't work, and it kept working. And kept working with people who'd been in therapy for years. It kept working with people who'd been stuck with their own cycle for years, sleepwalking, night terrors, anxiety, depression, you name it. There was people coming from everywhere. And I remember you said to me at one point, like, where are you finding these people? I'm like, I don't know. I just keep walking the office door. And the more people I helped with it, the more people that were gravitated towards me. So I think that was initially it. And then I was like, I'd gone from business coaching where it was very much that pragmatic sit down, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And helping someone accumulate the resources and training to get there. And then obviously my students started saying to me, where did you learn this stuff? And I kept referring them to you. And I told this story at our strategic planning day for the NLPAA on the weekend that for me, it was a real convincer because you could have, I kept referring people to you and you could have easily just taken them on board, got your sales commission, put them through the company you're working with at the time. And I would have been happy. You would have been happy. They would have been happy. But you called me up and you're like, your coaching clients need to learn this from you because that's where you need to go on and complete your trainer's training. And I probably put it off a couple of times. I think I said no to you a couple of times. I'm okay. I'm enjoying using the tools that I've got. And then one day, I think it was about the third or fourth time somebody asked me if they could learn. And I'm like, no, this is obviously a sign. So I picked up the phone. I said to you, mate, I'm in. I had no money at the time. You said to me, I'm going to put you on a payment plan. I said, no, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, but by the end of August, I'm going to have it fully paid off. And you were like, yeah, look, we tend to find the usual sales conversation that I now have had to have with my students for 10 years. Sorry, 5 or 6 years. But so it was like, yeah, we know, just get the commitment down, pay a deposit. I was like, no, I'm going to pay in full end of August. And we had this backwards and forwards. And eventually I said to you, Kellen, it's in my future timeline. It's happening. And then it was like, you were like, yep, all right, you got me. And literally from that moment on, I just started calling everyone that I knew that was interested in the course. And I said, look, I'm putting on a course. This is the dates. And I lined the dates up with, so we did trainers training. We then did a week practitioner course over here in WA as an assistant with Brad. And then I was going straight from that, finishing on the Friday, starting my course on the Monday. And I thought that was absolutely fine and thought nothing of it. Started booking people in, sold a heap of people into the training, finished my trainers training, realized that I was only about 70% of the way through and there was a heap of online stuff to do. Yeah. Thankfully, Connor was quite accommodating with that because I said, mate, I've got a training next week and I really got to get this done. So yeah, that was how I guess it all worked.
That's Whoa.
Oh, we loved him.
We loved them. I know. I was about to unpack his thinking a little bit.
Is there anyone in the chat room that's with us?
I've changed view.
He'll be back in a minute. He was on fire.
He's back in.
Here he is.
There we go.
We lost you for a minute.
That's all right. I'm back. Yeah. So that was basically, I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. I booked in enough people. And by the end of August, I had enough money to pay for my master practitioner trainers training and basically the whole suite of products up front. And I transferred the money very happily. First time in my life I'd had that much kind of money where I could pay for something up front. I'd just grown up in a family where it was, you paid for things, you had to go get a loan or you had to have a credit card. There was no paying for things up front. And it was just a big paradigm shift in the way that I had my relationship with money as well.
That's amazing. So can you unpack a little bit about your mind? Like most people would say you're crazy. What are you doing? You don't have the money. You don't have this. They would give all the reasons why you shouldn't do it. Meaning they care for you. They're not doing it because they don't want you to succeed or anything like that. They want to look after you. They want to nurture you, but they'll say because of their own, I'm mind reading here, but I want to from you would tell you're crazy. What was it that was so rock solid within yourself allowed you to break through those mental resistance bands or those mental barriers to keep going and do it?
Yeah, I think I really underestimated in my master practitioner course, all of my NLP training, the importance of an internal representation that had a really strong kinesthetic attached. So I had this very clear picture of me standing in front of the room, doing my first training and absolutely loving it. And I had a very strong positive kinesthetic associated with that and no negative kinesthetic. There was no like doubt. There was no uncertainty. There was no what if it goes bad. It was like, no, this is what I'm doing and this is what's going to happen. And then once I had that clarity, it was like even the conversation I had with you, mate, on the phone, when I found out I had another couple of assessments to do, and I think I had to do a phone assessment with you. And I was like, yeah, when can I book that? And you're like, I'm free in 3 weeks. I'm like, that's not going to work. And it was just not this question of, oh, that's the way it's got to be. It was like, no, this is what's happening. I just need the doors open to walk through. So it wasn't, and probably until the last couple of years, I've realized just how critical our internal representations are, the way that we internally represent things and the kinesthetics attached to it, that people talk about visions in businesses. And it was just a light bulb moment. I used to do a lot of vision workshops with people and I used to explain what the vision was. It's where you see the company in 5 years' time and stuff like that. But what I was missing in that corporate space that I was doing before I learned NLP was attaching the kinesthetic to it so that everybody, and getting rid of the negative kinesthetics attached to it. The fear, the sadness, the guilt, the shame of doing what it is that you want to do. The belief systems that we've got, like I had a lot of belief systems around I didn't have a fear of failure. I come from nothing. Our family had very little money most of the time, very low socioeconomical income bracket. So I come from nothing. So I wasn't scared of having nothing. I was actually more scared of success. So I had a lot of work that I had to deal with on being successful. And even now, I still feel awkward. If somebody says to me like, oh, wow, you're so good at this. I'm like, oh, thanks. And I brush it off. And one of my students actually brought it to my attention once. She tried to pay me a compliment. She's like, that's an interesting pattern. And I'm like, yep. Yeah, but that's what it was, mate. I think it's that absolute belief that this is what's going to happen. And then it's just a matter of navigating how that happens.
Yeah, that belief was certainly incredibly strong, and your IR was crystal clear, because I think maybe a week before you came to trainers training, so this is before you were even certified to certify others, you told me you had 11 or 12 people enrolled into your first practitioner training.
This was the thing, right? So I had this clear vision of me delivering trainings, and I'd got this. So I didn't know what sort of training I wanted to do until I learned NLP and I started to see it work in the coaching side. So it must have been in early 20s. I was a manager working in the car industry, and there was a guy there called Rick, and I can't remember his surname, but I just remember him just being this super engaging, fun, energetic guy. I normally go to those trainings and you sit there all day and it's death by PowerPoint and your workbooks and personality profiling and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, oh, this is going to be another one of those. And this guy was just super engaging. And I just remember thinking at that point, like, I want that dude's job. So I always knew I was going to end up there. And I think once I was never really sure of like, how do I structure that? How do I put my story together? How do I talk about? And to me, I always felt this thing, and I'm sure you guys hear this a lot from people, I don't have a big enough story. And so I was convinced in my own head that I didn't have a big enough story yet. I didn't have a product. I didn't have anything that was worth selling. And when I seen the results that I was getting with my NLP and my hypnosis with clients, then I'm like, okay, this is something I can absolutely wholeheartedly teach people without any doubt that it's going to work. And there are people that NLP doesn't work for. It's not a one size fits all. And the person has to be ready, willing, and able, and commit to the process themselves. It's not a therapy model where I do it to you. It's something that we do together. Both parties have to be fully committed. But when you've got two people like that, it's amazing the results that you can get. So I think that confidence that this was it, this was the thing that was going to make me the speaker. I always had the internal representation of being a speaker, but I had the fear of not being good enough, not being entertaining enough, not being funny, people not wanting to pay me.
So I want to rewind a little bit from that moment before you came to the practitioner training. You have spoken to me before about some of your first gigs speaking on stage, even emceeing, and then talking to me a little bit about one of your drivers when sitting in the audience one day, looking up at one of the trainers and feeling a little bit agitated that you felt like you could do a better job. So can you just walk us through that evolution from when you actually decided, you know what, I do have a story to tell the world. I do have a voice that I want to share. And maybe it was something completely different that pushed you, and I guess pushed this natural ability that you had further along, so that you were committed to evolving your own personal development to a point that you were standing on stage in front of people.
Yeah. So I think the one thing that I guess if someone's watching this, it's really critical that you just said there, I didn't have a natural ability. So I wasn't someone who was naturally good at getting up and speaking. I was quite good with words. I finished school in year 9. My spelling is atrocious, much better now, but my spelling was atrocious. If had to get up and write something like what's written on your board behind you, Callum, I would have absolutely just panicked because I would think I'm going to spell something wrong. And my first presentation was disaster. My first few presentations when I decided to be a speaker, I thought Facebook was really cheap at the time. I don't know if you remember back to when Facebook used to be able to spend $2 and you get 2,000, 10,000 views. And so I was running some very cheap ads, fumbling my way through Facebook. I look back at some of my videos now when I was speaking, I'm like, oh, dude, what are you doing? But you have to start somewhere. And I think the thing is, I hear so many people say, oh, I want it to be polished. I want it to be perfect before I start. And that's the wrong attitude. You just got to start. And my very first presentation, I had 2 people rock up, and there was 20 people that, said they were coming on the Facebook event, and then 2 people rocked up. So I'm doing my first presentation to 2 people. I went out to my network and I said, I pleaded with people to come to the next presentation. I hired a photographer who was going to do some really great photos, and 3 people turned up to that, including the photographer. So it was tough when I first started. And I think that's the thing, like when you first start, you don't have the credibility. You don't have people often look at someone like a Tony Robbins or even you guys or myself, and they're like, oh, that's such a big gap to change. It demotivates them. But even Tony Robbins started Tony's stories. I don't know for the story of how he became a speaker, but he was smart about it. He didn't try and grow his own profile initially. He just went out and found other people with profiles and jumped in on their bandwagon. And he would hire them, spend a huge amount of money to have people come and see Bob Proctor or those early guys. And then he would put himself on stage with those guys. And by association, he built his brands. And he listed that some of his early stuff, and he was not polished. Like he still swears a lot now. It just seemed awkward and funky. And I think that's the thing, is that it didn't come naturally to me, and I developed those skills over time. And NLP certainly helped accelerate that. But once I decided I was going to be a trainer, I think sitting in front of Brad at my first practitioner training was extremely agitating, because I just remember thinking like, I could do so much of a better job than him. And I remember thinking that's part of the reason I was getting so annoyed, because I'm like, and now knowing how to train NLP effectively, open loop metaphors and stuff like that, I just remember sitting there thinking like, this guy's not finishing his stories. He's talking around in circles. I asked him a question. And the other thing was, I had such a significance driver in me. Like I wanted people to see that I was special, because I'd never felt that. Was longing for that, for someone to go, you're amazing, you're great, but then had this push-pull relationship with it, whereas they'd say, you're great, and I'd want to back away. Yeah, I think I looked at Brad training and I'm thinking, this guy doesn't know how to train. Like he's just not finishing stories. He's talking around in circles. And because of this significant driver, I would go, oh, Brad, is that a bit like this? And I used to get, because trainers would be like, yes, Justin, that's exactly what it's like. And then I would get this sort of good feeling of like, yeah, see, I'm good at this. And Brad gave me nothing. Just would look at me and go, yep. And then just keep going. I'm like, hang on, this is not working.
Projecting it back onto you.
And so then I'm like amping it up. He just didn't understand how good I am at this. So I tried again and I got nothing. And I was getting so frustrated. And that was the stuff when we started talking about perceptions, projection, and cause and effect, and looking at the way that I was projecting myself from an outside perspective. Again, another tool that I just completely overlooked as being important in NLP until the last few years has been perceptual positions. Seeing how you behave from position 2 or position 3, the observer position or the other person's position, and seeing how your behavior is coming across to other people. And I probably had that experience before I really understood the significance of it, and went, oh, okay, yeah, like I'm just trying to get some kind of an attention. And of course, in every training now, my own projections show up in my training room, and I end up with those people in my training room as well. And I'm thankful for that experience, because I got to learn how to handle it. So
Nice. Did Brad ever finish those stories?
I actually don't think he did. And to be honest, most of my students say to me, like I always say, I'll finish them on day 7. And it's not that I don't mean to, I just forget. And then they forget, and they come back to me and
They keep coming
months. Yeah, they keep coming back. And months later, what was the end of that story? And I'm like, oh, which story do I tell? I'm like, I don't know. I just remember there was a shark. And I'm like, I don't have a shark story. And is
Are they coming back to hear the end of the story, or are you showing to tell them the end of the story, but you keep forgetting?
I intend to tell the end of the stories, not all the close loop, don't close all the metaphors, but on the last day, I generally do have a section there where I close off the metaphors, but it just gets overlooked so many times. I don't know, maybe it's an unconscious thing.
Maybe. You mentioned something really important, and you said that when you started, there was 2 people in front of you. And then the next, like you would have had to have taken quite a leap in order to hire a photographer on the whim that your room's on the plead that your room's going to be full. What were you saying to yourself during those periods where it would have been really easy to put it in the too hard basket? I know you had the image in your mind, the internal representation, you have the kinesthetic attached to it, but what self-talk, what were you saying to yourself? What was it that was driving you past anything other than I've got to make this work?
I'd failed at it a few times, to be really honest. So if I go back to earlier, I knew I wanted to be a speaker from quite a young age. A couple of times I would start. I remember when I got asked to come and talk at an event many years ago, and I really enjoyed it. And what happened was I prepared a speech. I turned up to the venue. And so what happened, I got asked to speak on networking, right? Now, I was this naive as a young manager. I didn't even know what networking was. So I Google networking back when Google was new, and it pops up with computer networking. I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure they don't want me to talk about that. And I finally found, networking is this thing. And so I wrote out, like, it must have been 10 or 15 speeches, and I practiced it in front of the mirror, to the dog, to the cat, to anyone that would listen, and I still didn't really have the confidence of why they'd asked me to speak in the first place. Mm-hmm. And what had happened just before we walk into the event, I'm standing outside, and there was a few guys there dressed very nice, suits, ties. And there was this guy who walked over to the group in fluoros. And as he walked towards the group, these guys just literally disbanded. I'm going to drink, I'm going to the toilet, back in a minute. And I was like, man, that was rude. And I was like, I wouldn't say shy, but I was like, I didn't really know anyone. So I was standing with my back to the wall, hoping someone would come and talk to me. And I watched this all unfold, and I just walked straight to the guy. I'm like, mate, I'm so sorry that just happened. That was really rude. And he said, oh, no, it's all good. It turns out he was a general manager in the rail system, and he'd been only in his fluoros for the day because they had a derailment and he had to quickly go, and he didn't have time to get changed. I just remember looking at that thinking, like, wow, people just actually assumed that guy, because he's in fluoros, was not their type of people. And I walk inside the room, I'd get up, walk up to do my speech, and I open my book, and my speech is not there. Like, I'd written it inside a book, and it was loose pieces of paper. And I looked down and I'm like, oh no, my speech isn't there. And so I thought, I'm just going to have to quickly write one. So I'm at the back of the room, like frantically writing out a bit of a speech before I walk up. Then they call me up. I get up to the, what are those things called, like where you speak from?
Is it like podium,
whatever. Yeah. So anyway, I get up there and I open my book and I look at my writing. I'm like, I can't even read my writing. I don't know a single word that I've written. I can't understand a single word. And I'm just looking at it. I'm thinking, and I remember looking up, and there was probably 30 people in the room, and I was terrified. Like, there was 30 sets of eyes looking at me, just waiting for me to speak. And I remember thinking at that moment, I have to say something because they're waiting for me to talk. And so I just said, guys, look, I'm really sorry. I was so nervous about this speech. I wrote it down so many times. I didn't even know what networking was, told the whole story. So I wrote it down so many times, and I left it at the office, and I realized about 10 minutes ago, I've rewritten this speech, and now I can't even read my writing. And everyone just cracked up laughing. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, that was really easy. And because I got that first laugh, then all I did was I fell into telling stories by accident, whether you believe in accidents or not, but I fell into telling stories because then I told the story how I'd seen this all unfold outside the door, and how, to me, networking wasn't about the amount of people that you knew, or the contacts that you had, or the business cards you collected, or the people that you could get as clients. To me, it was like, just find people to help and just be a normal person. And at the end of it, people came up. It was amazing. That was such a good talk. That was really great. And I was like, the structure of talking was more story-based. And so I think that early experience of getting it wrong, but getting it right, and putting myself in that situation where I had no option to back out, was what gave me confidence when I had those little moments where I'm like, oh, there's 3 people have turned up. It's okay. I'll get there. And I think I definitely had self-talk. I turned up and there was 2 people standing there, and I'm like, oh, maybe we'll just cancel it. But I was like, no, these people have come. They paid like $25 at the time to come and hear me speak for 2 hours. And I'm thinking, well, they paid $25. I either give them their $50 back, which I probably didn't have at the time to give back. Probably already spent it on the photographer or something, but didn't have the money to give back. So either give them their money back, or I just do the presentation. So I think that just getting up and continually presenting, no matter whether there was 2 people or 200 people in the room, each time I did a presatation, it just got a little bit better.
You get these quotes and sayings, getting back on the horse, and you never lose if you always get back up. Or I saw another one about when you win, what is it? You'll always win if you keep getting up. Is that sort of the mantra? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's thinking that's
yeah. It's really interesting, mate, because I think I used to have that. I went through a bit of a phase where I just assumed that life was like my mum and dad, getting a job, living week to week, paying the mortgage off. And hopefully if you had a little bit of money left over, we would literally be the type of family that dad would work full time, mum would stay home. Thursday night was takeaway night because that was pay night. And then from there, it was like pay night. Friday was shopping day, Saturday, Sunday. And if we had treats left over by Wednesday to take to school before the next payday, like that was like, wow, we had stuff left over. So I just grew up like that. And so to me, it was I never had that very loving and caring, albeit they had some of their own challenges. But yeah, I never really thought that I could win initially. And then when I was telling my mum this story the other day, I remember my dad raced cars as well. And I distinctly remember my dad used to struggle doing everything. And like he would do everything on the cheap, he would do everything himself. And I remember this other guy rocking up with this brand new car that somebody else had built. And it just blew my mind. I'm like, who can afford to have somebody else build a car? Like, what is this witchcraft? Doesn't everyone just build their own stuff? And I remember at that point thinking, wow, one day I'm going to get to the point where I can just pay someone else to do it if I don't want to do it. And so those little things along the way. And again, I could have given that completely different meaning and gone, oh, some people are just rich and they're lucky and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that initial, and then I went through that phase of like, you just got to keep getting back up. And to be really honest, the last probably 3 years, maybe 4 years, I got to a point where I'm like, when your projections are so clear, there just isn't setbacks. Like it's such a bizarre place to sit in. Like I'm very lucky getting into the car racing and stuff like that. I met some very successful people in all areas of life, business, family, career, and they just don't have I've got to get back up again attitude. They just have I'm going to win attitude. Like it's just not even a thing. And I'm just going to quickly show you something. This is my first year of car racing. And that's the trophies from the first year. Because I think I just took that attitude into everything I'm gonna, and I don't go in there thinking I'm going to win against other people. It's just like, I'm just going to do my absolute best. And I don't know. I just don't really get a lot of setbacks. Like I guess other people might see them as setbacks, but I just don't get a lot anymore. I used to. I think when I had that attitude of just keep getting up, just keep giving it a shot, just keep keeping on and don't give up and all that sort of stuff. Like that projection, I don't know is necessarily as helpful as the projection is I'm just going to win. Like it's just going to happen.
I want to get to the car racing soon because it fascinates me. It's like when you look at people, and I'm not trying to make parallels between you or someone like Da Vinci, but somebody who is across multiple things in life and is really good at them. And you're one of those people that I know that whatever they do, they seem to do very well at it. But there was definitely a lot that you took growing up, and the things that happened to us early on in life, we either accept or we reject them. Okay.
Yeah.
And you had a challenging upbringing. There was lots of, from the stories you've told me, there was lots of love. You didn't know that you were wanting for anything, but there were certainly some challenges within your household. And you've spoken a lot about the special memories you've had with your dad and racing cars. And I guess that ingenuity that you had by having to fix things yourself, having to build things yourself. And you certainly took that into business with you, especially when you started in Inspired Results. And knowing what you created there and the infrastructure that you created, it is huge. Like the membership portal that you have, all of the different training resources that you have, all of the different micro trainings that you have. You definitely made a switch at some point from that away from thinking to the towards focused thinking, where you just picked up speed and you picked up momentum. And it was this go forward attitude from having, I think you ended up with 15 people in your first practitioner training. And I think you ran 4 more over the next 12 months. What is it was there a starting point? Was it just like you were doing things as you needed to? Were you planning things out? Who was mentoring you? Who was helping you at the time? And what was it that sort of was your North Star that helped guide you through those initial stages of starting your training business and coaching business?
The first thing that comes to mind then was what have I got to lose type of thing. There was I tried to start businesses when I had money. Like I remember I had about $10,000 in the bank. And to me at the time, that was like $10,000 in the bank at once that I didn't owe anybody money was just so mind blowing to me. And I remember thinking, okay, now's the time to start my business. And it didn't take off. And so the second time around, my third attempt at starting the coaching business was when I met you guys. And at that point I had no money. And it was just like, oh, I'm just doing this. And that's just been the attitude, I think, even in every aspect of I'm just doing this. And I think when I meet people who in coaching who say, oh, I just don't think that I can, my projections are just so clear that of course you can. And there's times where people just look at me like I've got 2 heads. What do you mean I can do that? I'm like, why can't you? Like able-bodied, you can do it. So I think there was just that attitude of, not the attitude of, and one of the things I remember, and I'm not sure whether it was one of you guys that said it or a trainer along the way, but something that really stuck with me is that mantras don't work unless you really believe in them. So I think I never found myself standing in front of the mirror trying to convince myself of something. I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. It's just a decision. And I think that the more that I've got to work with people over the years, the more that you realize everything's a decision. Anger is a decision. Deep down somewhere at some point in life, you made the decision that in this scenario, symbolic scenario, the best way to play out to try and get what you want, either away from what you don't want or toward what you do want, is by anger. And so once I realized, I guess, that it would just come down to decisions, it's just as simple as saying, well, I'm going to do that. And that's just what's going to happen. And I like to give you an example. When I sat down in my practitioner course with Brad, he got us to write down our goals. And I can't remember which day what that was. And I wrote down in there was, I wanted $100,000 in my first year of running my business. And that terrified me. I remember looking at a guy, never earned $100,000 in a year ever before, even as an employee. And I went home that night and something changed. I got back. I'd obviously made the decision that's what was going to happen. I remember looking at the page the next day, and I actually still have the book. I crossed out the 100,000 and wrote 200,000. Now, from that moment, I had just only started business a couple of months before that. I got Xero, so Xero accounting software. And I was telling someone this story years ago, how like just once you make the decision on one thing, the next decision doesn't seem as scary. The 100,000 seemed terrifying. But once I'm like, no, that's what's going to happen. The 200,000 didn't seem as scary as what the 100,000 did. And that particular person said to me, what did you actually end up earning? It was like a massive open loop for them. And I was like, I don't actually know. I had no idea. So I went back inside my Xero to have a look what I'd earned for that year in revenue. And it was 196,000. And I was like, wow, that's just mental that I never looked at my numbers. I never had gone back and gone, oh, what am I earning? What am I doing per month? And in a small business, you probably should look at your numbers a bit more, but I wasn't. And I literally got back a year after, that's 2 years after I'd set that goal, and went, wow, look at that. I literally earned almost to the dollar what I'd intended to earn. So I think it's that decision with intention, and just once you make that decision, just taking action towards it. And it's just, I don't know, things just fall into place. But it's the doubt and the negative emotions that if you have it, either of those two things seem to crop up. They seem to be the things that pop up first. But sorry, just to answer one other quick thing. One of the other things that really, really hit home for me was the away toward thing. So the me, not me assessment. I remember going through and there was things there. I was like, oh, if I'd have realized that the not me thing was that, I would say I don't care. For anyone who's watching this who hasn't done a master practitioner through you guys, like there was an assessment where it gives you a statement and then you say it's me, don't care, not me. And I had a lot of things in the don't care column and in the not me column. And when I realized that the not me column is things that I'm trying to move away from and that's taking energy, I was like, oh, no, that wouldn't be me. I don't have a lot of not me stuff. And then I read the statement. I'm like, oh man, like so much stuff that I'm constantly trying to move away from. Yeah. So once I cleared that up, there's still things that come up. You know, I had a training recently where something come up for me. It was a really good mate of mine in the training room, and it was something was coming up for me. I didn't know what it was. I called a coach, Arabella, actually, funnily enough, McPherson's. Me and Belle still talk a lot. And yeah, I called her and I was like, Bells, I don't know what this is about. And she was on holidays in Thailand. I'm like, I need some help because I'm day 2 of prac. I can't keep dragging this projection through prac. So that was only a year ago. So stuff still comes up, but it's being able to have the tools to just clear out that projection. Yeah.
I've got a few more questions, and I know that we don't have all day. I know you're busy, Justin. And one of the things, like, it just blows my mind, right? Because you were this knockabout guy in this practitioner training, trying to walk through me to get out the door to leave the training, which is just crack up. And I'm glad Brad didn't finish his stories, because I think at the end of the day, besides my reframing, that was probably the only thing that kept you there. And from that point, you ran your first practitioner training. You ran for more that year. So can you just unpack a little bit more about Inspired Results and how you came to be one of the chairmen of the Australian Association of NLP? That just blows my mind a little bit. This young knockabout guy from Bunbury in WA that has just created this amazing result in the field that is quite unique in many ways, because you're one of the people that I've noticed that as a trainer, you've also coached thousands of people as well. And you haven't just coached them on easy things. There's been quite challenging things. And they even challenged me when you used to call me up and said, how do I work with this person? And a lot of the times I'd say, look, I'm just thinking about the process here in my mind, or I'd put you on hold and ask Connor and ask him for advice, and just maybe say that, I need to get back to you. I'll look in the manual and get back to you. And I'd go and talk to Connor. But how does a guy from WA, from Bunbury, this relatively small place on the map, end up becoming one of the chairman of the Australian Association of NLP?
I think when I first learned NLP, one of the things I started doing was, once I was convinced that it wasn't just a thing that happened in the training, it wasn't trickery, and it wasn't just fish. I think that I started applying NLP to everything and every conversation I had, I was like, what's that person doing inside their head? And I think every NLP trainer worth their salt will talk about curiosity being the number one thing that you need to have in order to be a good NLP practitioner. And so I would sit there thinking that person's doing something inside their head and stepping out of the story that they were telling me and looking at it as a metaphor rather than getting involved. So people would tell me some horrendous stuff that happened to them in the life. And I'm like, oh, it's a metaphor. What's that a metaphor for? And then I'd put the metaphor into like chunking across. I'd chunk across all the details they gave me, I don't even know if this is the correct term. I teach my students, it's called an analogical marker. I don't know if that's really a thing or not, but
I think you're crossing two topics there, mixing them together, but that's okay. Keep going. I know what you mean.
To me, an analogical marker was something that was an analogy that marked in a sentence that was something that was critical to the direction of that sentence, right? So I would pull that across and say, okay, all of these, imagine them as being buoys in the water. If I lined all of them up, what is the pattern that I've got rather than what's the story the person's told me? Because you can get caught into a person's story. And some of the stuff that I've been privy to over the years is horrendous that's happened to people. And it'll be very easy to get stuck into oh my God, that's terrible, can't believe that happened to you. I'd look at it and go, oh, that's a pattern. And then I would feed the pattern back and say, these things along the way, where else have these patterns shown up in life? And the client would almost always go, oh my God, that's everywhere. And so pretty early on, I realized that it wasn't just as simple as just clearing out a negative emotion or a limiting decision or whatever. There was something deeper going on behind what the person even thought was happening. And once I realized that, it was just then using language patterns to create this sequence of events that had led to this event, and then trying on where else that pattern showed up. And once the client was like, oh, that pattern shows up everywhere in my life, it was then going, okay, what do I need to do that's going to essentially remove that whole pattern without doing a heap of work? So is this whole pattern tied to me avoiding a negative emotion or trying to achieve something? It always comes down to it's a person either trying to achieve a good feeling or move away from a bad feeling. And the bad feeling may be tied to a belief system or a negative emotion. But if the person I have this bad feeling, because you remember feeling is just a barometer for safety. That's what they're there for. Is every animal that has them is, if you scare me, I'm going to move away from that. If you hug me, I'm going to move toward that, provided that creates positive emotions. Once I realized that, it was like, okay, what's the pattern that is leading to this person? Is that pattern trying to avoid a negative emotion or get a positive emotion? And how can we find a way to get a more positive outcome? So I think I just started applying it to everything. I started thinking, like, what's that person doing in their head? They're making a picture. Are they making a sound? Is there a smell, a taste, or some auditory digital? Is this internal dialogue that's happening there? And then I asked them. I don't know how many times students said to me, can you actually ask people that? I'm like, who cares? Like, they're doing it inside their head. They're not consciously aware of it necessarily. But if you bring it to their attention, they'll tell you directly, yeah, that's exactly what's happening for me. And I think initially a lot of that stuff, I remember having this conversation with you, Cal, like a lot of stuff at prac, I was like, what is going on here? What have I just done? What have I unraveled? And you go, sometimes that stuff happens. And I'm sure you're getting off the phone going, what does? But I didn't quite understand it until master practitioner. And then I started getting more involved with the deeper levels of NLP and understanding that we were just changing a pattern of behavior. So that pattern of behavior it could be smoking, drinking, being depressed, being anxious, self-harming, suicidal, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I think once I stepped back from the emotion of the potential outcome, it was much easier to work with clients, because if I had a young girl come in who was self-harming, I didn't look at it as, oh my God, what's the potential outcome if she keeps self-harming? I looked at it as, okay, it's a pattern. She's avoiding a negative emotion or trying to get a positive emotion, or potentially a combination of both. How do I change the pattern so she can get that toward focus or remove the negative emotion she's trying to avoid, and then she doesn't have to avoid it? So I think when I started looking at NLP that way, that really practical, curious way, my skill set it exploded.
Yeah, I love what you said about the emotions being a barometer for safety. I've never heard it put that way before. I often use the analogy of it being the VIMs on your car dashboard. When we have certain emotions, it's telling us something. There's something that we need to learn, and it's not necessarily taught to us growing up. And what NLP does, and a number of the other active imaginations techniques that we learn, is that it teaches us how to go to the glove box, get out the user manual, and look at what that particular signal or that alarm means, and get the learning from it, and then make the necessary changes in order to continue driving down the road. So yeah, that was really cool to hear it put in a different way, and have it linked back to safety as that prime need that we all have. One of the prime needs that we all have.
Yeah, in a tribe, if you think about people in a tribe, they're a tribe of 150 to 200 people. We're social animals. We're very much about connection and making sure that we're connected. If you remove a person from the tribe, it's almost certain death. So there's this absolute terror of being removed from our tribe. And if you look at high school age children, they're not living in the same environment they used to. We used to have 150 to 200 people in a tribe. There'd be all various ages, very similar belief systems, very similar understandings, models of the world that we're communicating with. Now we put 400 14-year-olds in a school and wonder why they all can't get along, because they've got different values, different model of the world, different understandings, different belief systems. They have different fears. They have different reasons for the social connection. And then what should happen with my daughter, where she gets excluded from a group and all of a sudden she literally, in her body, it's the absolute worst. She feels like she's going to die, because that's what would happen if you're in a tribe and you got removed from that tribe. So I think that when you step back and look at it from a tribal point of view and say, okay, what's the intention behind our emotions? What's the intention behind the way that we behave and act? And if I ever get confused, I pull that behavior out and say, in a tribe, what would that behavior mean? If that person was just part of a tribe, what would that behavior mean?
Yeah, and we're diving a little bit into Claire Graves' values, because very much in a tribe, safety is high value, and that's what the tribe provides for everybody. I just want to shout out to the guys in the chat room. We've got Corinne Bokta here saying, great story, Justin. Krim's just come back from the US. He's just done a TED talk over there. So that's pretty exciting. Congratulations, Krim. Your Facebook and your Instagram has been awesome to follow. Thanks for sharing that. And we've also got Michael Vanderplas as well. Three of the coolest guys I know.
Yeah.
So true. Patterns always seem to just pop out after asking our clients questions. I love seeing their expressions when we point them out. Yeah, that is correct. It's about making the unconscious conscious. And Michael definitely does that with the work that he does, doing a lot of suicide awareness work at the moment out there. So I've got about 15 minutes left. One of the things that I really want to ask you about is another passion of yours, and that's car racing, and also the way that you've applied a lot of the mindset coaching that you've done in the past with actually getting faster and faster lap times, that it has led to a lot of those trophies on the wall. So could you share a little bit about that with us?
I can. I've just got a guy here with a lawnmower. It's just, hopefully you can't hear that too loud.
We can't hear it. We can't hear it.
Okay, good. All right, cool. Yeah. So look, I think like I said, I apply NLP to everything. And so when I decided to go into car racing, I went to every single person. I just literally went to the top of the timesheet and I looked at the first 5 or 6 people who were driving cars similar to mine. And I would just go and chat to them and say, what do you guys do? How do you take that corner? Where do you drive here? What do you do there? What have you done to your car? How do you make it turn in? And I would ask all the questions and create a model from each person I spoke to. And then I would combine all the models and go, okay, cool. Those people are doing that. Okay, that working. And I'd just go out and try the model on. And it's funny because a couple of the guys towards the end of the season, we finished second outright in one of our rounds, which is exceptionally competitive. To finish in the top 10 is a pretty decent feat for someone, especially in their first year. To finish in the top 20, your first year is probably a decent feat. Yeah, so we finished second outright. One of the guys walked up to me, he's like, hey, 6 months ago, you were asking me how to do this. Now I'm coming to ask you how to do this. And that was that sort of moment where I was like, yeah, that's modeling. And I just had no ego attached to not knowing. That was the bit that's blown me away the most, is that when you talk to people, they all want to tell you what they do know. Very rarely you meet someone who says, oh, I actually don't know. Could you tell me, or could you help me? And I have this saying in my trainings that all my students all laugh about, but it's called being dumb like a fox.
Tell us more about that. I'm interested to
Dumb
hear
as
that.
a fox, right? So like foxes are quite a clever creature. They're very sly. So to me, it's this concept of just be dumb like a fox. Like the clever people say very little. And again, having been around some exceptionally successful people, I've got a couple of very good mates of mine who are very wealthy, have very stable families, and I guess when you look at success, you can't just measure in a financial capacity, because there's people who have a lot of money, but maybe not nice people. So when I look at success, I look at it across their whole life. And I've got a couple of really good friends who, when I look at what they do and how they act and how they interact with people, it's just such they just have this is what's going to happen, an attitude. And they very rarely talk. Like I remember meeting Dave, who is one of my really good mates now. And I was asking him questions and he would just give me nothing. Like he wouldn't talk a lot. And as I found out with Dave, I didn't know he's very successful, but I think a lot of people who are quite successful tend to say very little. And that was probably something that I learned as well, was well, I remember my dad saying, you've got two ears in one mouth for a reason, using in the same proportion. I never really understood that until I really got into NLP, and I was like, you learn nothing from talking. You learn a lot from listening.
Yeah, I think that's one of your superpowers, actually feeling comfortable with not knowing about something and being willing to go ask people and not having any ego around that, whether that be good or bad, because that's something that I learned from you actually, is you've always been willing to ask questions, even if it makes you look like you don't know something. And a lot of people, when they feel like they don't know something, can associate that with being stupid or not smart enough or not intelligent or whatever. But for you, it was just a matter of, as soon as I ask you and as soon as I know, I'll go and replicate it as good as you. And I'm glad you brought up modeling, because that's something that we pride ourselves on with what we do with excellence as well.
So on that too, I've just gone into an industry. So sold inspired results to one of my graduates, which was
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah. And congratulations to her, because she's put a lot of work into, and we'll put a lot of work into making it our own. Sold that business, and I've gone back into the corporate world, which is, I worked out was something that I really felt was something I wanted to do. And I've gone back into a general manager role in a shipping industry, which I have never worked in shipping. So what was incredible about going back into shipping was that shipping is an industry which has a lot of people who are decades of experience. And so we're sitting down with a major miner who is one of our biggest clients, and we're sitting with their head of operations for the shipping side of things. And he says, so tell me, you've got this job as general manager, like, where did you come from? Because he obviously hadn't heard from me in the shipping circles. And I said, oh, look, I've come from outside shipping. I said, what I don't know about shipping, I've got a great operations team. I said, but what I do bring is the ability to communicate, the ability to lead people, the ability to have vision, the ability to innovate and to look at something that maybe other people wouldn't have seen because they're in the industry. So that's my strength. But as far as the operations and the shipping side of things, I've got a strong team who can look after that. And he said, but you've done shipping before, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I've done shipping before, like the last 2-3 weeks. And we're sitting in front of an executive manager of a major company. And most people would have been terrified of saying, yeah, I've got no experience. But I was like, who cares? What's the guy going to say? It's the truth. And he just laughed and he's like, hats off to you. He's like, what can I do to help? And I think that the core thing that when I talk about, dumb as a fox, is being totally vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, people, and again, my dad had this metaphor when we were kids of, we had Jack Russells, and if the Jack Russells were ever getting really serious about, they'd muck around and play fight. But if one got serious, the other would just roll over and instantly the fight stops, right? So I took that metaphor literally as a kid, that if you ever get stuck, just back out and show that bit of vulnerability. Look, I didn't know, I'm not sure, I'm asking you a question. And I found that when you show vulnerability, people show up for you. So I think when I talk about dumb as a fox, I can sit here and tell you what I know about something, but I'm more interested about what you know that I don't.
When I first started working with Connor, and I spent a lot of time asking dumb questions and being dumb as a fox to extract the model from him. So I really value that as a superpower as well, being able to look at someone who's excellent at something and be able to model that excellence and turn it into a process so that you can quickly adapt and try it on yourself.
And finding models, people worth modeling. Like, that's the other thing with the racing that the thing with modeling in business is there's an element of like, how much was luck, how much of it was right place, right time, how much it was network and all that sort of stuff. With car racing, everything is measured. Like, you either went faster or you didn't. And you either went faster by 1/10 or 1/2 or 2/10 or you didn't. And so I have a driver coach. So that was the first thing that I invested in. Once I got the car up and running and I got comfortable, I went and got a coach and I said, I want to get faster. What do I need to do? And again, we test and measure. So measure everything. We go, he's like, I want you to drive through this corner like this. And this is the bit where I explain to people that I think I've been very lucky is my driver coach will say, Justin, I want you to drive through this corner like this. I'll sit in the car, I'll close my eyes, I'll imagine going through that, just self-hypnosis, go through that exactly how I want it to be, make sure that I can feel the car, VK synesthesia, and just make sure that I can feel the car, I can see what's happening, and I can respond to how I think the car's going to respond. And what's incredible is that driver coach said to me one day, he said, out of all the people I've coached, you're the only person who goes out there and does exactly what I tell you to do every single time. And whether sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but that's been the thing, is that self-hypnosis to be able to go out there, okay, I'm going to take that corner slightly differently. And then I don't have to consciously think about it. My body just does it because that's what I did. And I drive in trance. I've realized even at 230 kilometers an hour, you are definitely in a trance. And it's fascinating because sitting in the car, I'm looking down the road. I know exactly where I want the car to go. You're feeling the car, the feedback you're getting from the car through the pedals, steering wheel, and the seat. And I noticed that because I drive with a co-driver, we do rallies, so I drive with a co-driver. And I noticed that even though I'm looking down the road in my periphery, and this is talking about foveal vision, I can be in foveal and both foveal and peripheral at the same time. And I can see what he's doing with his body. I can hear his voice. I know when he's getting nervous, especially when he tries to put his foot on the brake. I can see that stuff happening while I'm completely focused on what I'm doing. Yeah, hypnosis is such a critical part of any skill, I think, and being able to, then it's one thing to model, but then you've got to be able to imprint that skill on yourself.
100%. With the modeling exercise, Justin, I think you said you modeled it and you went out and he said, you listened to me, even if you were successful, I don't know the words you used, but even if you managed to pull it off successfully or not, you still did it. And really it's a notion that I've been playing with for a little while, is that when you model excellent behavior, it just gives you the highest possible percentage of getting that success. So a lot of people think that you have to get 100%, and they put it in the too hard basket, but they say it doesn't work. But when you model something and you have that strategy, I was using the metaphor with Lionel Messi this morning, Cal, you're actually putting yourself in that position to have the greatest success possible. It's going to Harvard University. It won't guarantee you a good job, but it will certainly statistically give you an incredibly high chance of landing that if that's your goal. I find modeling does exactly the same way. Even if it's not 100% all the time, statistically, it'll give you the highest possible percentage of winning if you apply that model.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the car, often he'll say, I want you to drive through the corner like this. And when we look at the data, we say, oh, the data actually says that's slower. But the fact that I've been able to go out there and produce that result and then check the data and then you go, okay, we modeled something that didn't work. And then again, go back, hypnosis, get myself into trance, go back, go, okay, we're going to try it this way this time and then model that. And then eventually you tie all of those corners together and that's where we come up with some extremely quick times.
Yeah, look, I think there's going to be a lot of people getting a lot of great things out of this today. The people that were watching, Michael actually also said that his mum, I think he was referring to the dumb as a fox analogy. His mum uses that as well. I got the emotions are a barometer for safety for people. I got when you're modeling, make sure that you're modeling it exactly how the person that you're modeling tells you to do it. And that way you can get the data so that you can correct it and see what's what. You also had the towards focused internal representations on what you wanted to achieve. And you said that you made a decision. It wasn't even like you had self-talk. It wasn't even a belief at that point. It was just a decision that you made to be successful, to make it happen, and to continue as you made each decision, have that shine a light on the very next step that you needed to take, and not take things as, in my words, not take things as failures, use them as feedback. So therefore not having any setbacks, not having the feeling of having to get back on the horse because you're on the horse the whole time. And the big goals that you're setting yourself, the challenges that come along actually a representation of the big goal and you achieving them. I wanted to say a huge thank you for your time. I know you've got a couple of clients this afternoon. I've got to jump into a client meeting as well. Where can people find you, Justin? You have your Subaru page and then you've got your personal page, and obviously you'll be still helping Kelsey out for people that want to do live trainings over in WA. Where can people find you? Give us a little bit of a plug and so people can follow along with your story.
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably best, either LinkedIn or Facebook. I've got an Instagram page for the race car as well, which is inspired_WX_. If you want to follow along on that journey, that's been a pretty cool journey.
It's actually quite fun. I love watching. You've got a lot of great videos with you in the car, and it's actually quite thrilling to watch. So that's a good one to follow. Where can people find you on LinkedIn?
Just Justin O'Hare on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. So happy to.
Yeah, I've just tagged you as such in the comments.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
So, Cal, just before you go, one thing that I just wanted to say, I know you asked this question a couple of times. I didn't actually answer it around the booking 4 trainings. When I had 4 trainings that my first year, I remember having a conversation with you and you're like, you're doing 4? Wow, that's amazing. I was like, doesn't everyone do that? I just had this, just a bit of a moment where I just remembered like that. It's set your own goals. I know when I started working with marketing companies, they say, oh, we're going to do an assessment on your competitors. I'm like, what for? Just do your own thing, run your own race, do what you want to do and focus on what you want.
Yeah, it sounds like
Cliffy Young. Have you heard that story?
No.
The sheep farmer, 68 years old, running the ultra.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't let anybody tell him he couldn't do it, and he ended up winning it. I think because he didn't adopt most people's limiting beliefs around whether or not he could do it, and he just kept running. He didn't realize he had to have a sleep or a break. He just kept running and putting one foot in front of the other and making it happen.
Yep. No, that's it.
Thanks for your time. Welcome to the
you.
first Connect catch up. Justin, you were the first guest on our now regular show. I haven't told Connor that, but we're looking forward to catching up with more people from our community and highlighting some of the amazing stories that they've had and how they're applying what they've learned along the way.
Yeah. And like anyone watching this, if they've got this far and they're not already using you guys, I highly recommend. So I'm going to give you a bit of a plug. I hope you don't mind, but where I was 5 or 6 years ago, I owe in massive amounts of thanks to both you and Connor, because Connor was the first person I spoke to about 8 years ago. And obviously, Kel, you and I have had a huge amount to do with each other. And I think that a lot of what I've been able to produce has been because of you two and the support that you give. So thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. You're a legend. Appreciate your time.
Too easy. See you guys.
See you, buddy. Thank you.
See you. Take care.